There are no slides today, so everything will be done real-time, live coding. There's no theory pieces to give you as there was last time. So I'll start by sharing my screen, and then what I will do is I will move to walking you through the setup to remind you where we left off last time. And if you weren't here last time, you can watch the webinar. It was recorded and available for you so you can catch up. So I'll start by bringing up my browser window. And here you're seeing the dashboard in the Arbutus cloud, pretty much as we left it last time. So here in the center of the screen, we can see that I have an instance that's running. And so an instance is a virtual machine. Instance is just the name that OpenStack, which is a tool that Arbutus and the Compute Canada clouds in general use. And instance is what OpenStack calls a virtual machine. So I have one here, and it's called WestGrid Demo. We can see the IP addresses for it. There's an internal IP address in case I have multiple machines that are running. They can talk to each other within the network. And very importantly, we also have a floating IP that we assigned last week. Within Compute Canada, these 206 IPs are external IPs, so you can actually access the virtual machine from the outside world once you have the firewall set up. And that, again, was done last week. We can see a flavor here, so it's T2, so that means it's a persistent cores, and so these are the cores that are shared across a number of users, and they're great for running small, low-intensity sort of websites, particularly in the academic sphere, and it's got 3 gigs of RAM. So it's not particularly powerful, but if I'm just running a static web page or even some very light service, it's going to be fine. You see that a key pair has been assigned. This is something we did last week. And so these key pairs are the way that we provide access. We forged the key pair last time. So there's a public key, which you share with anybody, and the public keys are used to lock pieces of software or tools or documents. And then there's a private key, which you keep yourself, that's used to unlock them. So we've locked this VM with the public key, and the private key is on my computer, and I've already used it to log in, and we'll get to that in a moment. We can see its status is active. We have the ability to lock or unlock the instance. That's available from the Actions side on the right-hand side of the screen here. That is something we didn't do last week. But if you want to prevent your instance from accidentally being deleted, you can pull down the drop-down menu on the right-hand side under Actions and choose to lock it. You can still use it, you just can't do things like delete it and so on and so forth. We talked about availability zones last week. There's 2 persistent availability zones. And this allows you to do load balancing or set up redundancy. If repairs need to be done on Arbutus or updates, and you have set it up, they'll shut down persistent 1. Persistent 2 will keep running, and then vice versa. You can see the time here says 12 hours and 21 minutes, and we built this 2 weeks ago. I've actually gone through this 3 times to make sure that everything will go smoothly today, so that's why it looks a little bit newer than you might be expecting if you were here last week. The other thing that I'll point out before we get started, 2 things here. One with volumes. When we built the virtual machine last week, we did tell it that we wanted the volume to be separate from the virtual machine itself. So I'm calling up the volume sum menu here, and here we can see that it has given it this really long, very specific, really unlikely to be duplicated name. It's 20 gigabytes. We can see exactly where it's attached to. Here on the actions, I have the ability to edit the volume, so I'm just clicking that now. And one thing that we didn't do last week that might be helpful for you is to actually give your volumes a name. So I'm just going to call this the WestGrid Demo volume. So I'm going to delete the content that's already there. WestGrid Demo. You could provide a description. We'll leave everything else as is, and it'll do its work. And you'll see that the name has changed to something that's much more human readable than that hashy mess that was there before. So we also created the volume last week when we built the VM. And then the last thing I need to point out before we get started is the security groups, which we built last week. And so there's a default security group, which should be attached to all your VMs and should just be left as is. And then within our quota, we have the ability to have 2 security groups, so we added one more. We called it SSH, and what that allows me to do is use the secure shell interface to access the virtual machine with that key pair, and we showed how to do that last week. So that's where we are as far as Arbutus goes and the OpenSpec dashboard. So we've got one virtual machine with the properties I just pointed out, and it's ready to go. So I'm going to swap now to my command line interface. And you can see here that I've just logged in to the virtual machine. We see the standard Ubuntu update messages and so on and so forth. You can see that there's 5 packages to be updated. I don't have any security updates. I've actually just run the update and the upgrade again. And that's something that you should do on a regular basis. It's important to remember that the service we provide is infrastructure as a service, which basically means we give you these little computer components that virtualized, you assemble them into a virtual computer, and then it's yours. So security within the virtual machine is very much your responsibility. So running, if you're running Ubuntu, then it would be sudo apt-get update and sudo apt-get upgrade on a regular basis. It's going to be important to make sure that your virtual machine and your research is safe. So that's where we are. So what are we going to do today? We are going to set this virtual machine up to be basically a static web page server. So static web pages are pages that don't have a lot of interactivity, typically none. We can add some JavaScript and so on and so forth. We're not going to do that today, but it's certainly not going to have a database like MySQL in the background, and it's not going to be using a language like PHP to interact with that database. That's a step into the future for us. We're going to install a web server. We're going to install a web server. It's relatively new compared to Apache. It's called Nginx, and you'll see how that's spelled shortly. And that's going to give us the ability to serve web pages, just HTML pages to people on the internet, and you'll see the process for doing that. There's been a big shift that's happened fairly recently, and there's a lot of movement towards not just HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol, but to an upgraded version of that, upgraded in terms of its security. It's called HTTPS, Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. And so first we'll set it up to run HTTP, and then we'll do the steps that are required to run HTTPS. And we'll go through why that's important and why that's probably attractive to you when we get to the HTTPX section. So let's get started. So if you're following along from last week, you've already got your virtual machine up. You're in the same position that you were when we left. You're logged into your virtual machine. You've done your update. You've done your upgrades. So let's go to work. So we are using Ubuntu for this demo. So Ubuntu has passwordless sudo. Sudo is super user do. And because we're going to be installing software on the system, we're going to have to become the super user, or sometimes referred to as the root user. So I type sudo for that. And the program I'm going to use to install is apt-get. It stands for aptitude-get. It's a set of repositories that I can draw from. And what I'd like to do here is I want to install a piece of software. And I mentioned that we're going to be using Nginx. And that's how Nginx is spelled, N-G-I-N-X. So we're going to install Nginx. So this is going to be the web server. It asks me right here, do you want to continue? Well, if I want the web server, I'm going to have to say yes. And we can see it's pretty small, right? It's only going to be about 8,000 kilobytes or 8 megabytes, right? So it's not that big. And it'll install really, really quickly for us right here, right now. One of the reasons I chose it. Let's go back to the door. I think somebody's got their microphone on in the background. A small child or maybe a cat is stretching, I'm not sure. Okay, so we've installed Nginx, right? And so here we're going to actually try and actually see the web page, see if it's actually up and if it's running, right? So I'm going to swap out of...
actually a video conference, so do it off camera.
I'm going to swap back to my browser window. I'm going to go back to the compute panel and my list of instances. What I need from here is the floating IP address. So I'm going to copy and paste it. So I'm just going to highlight it here. And I'm just using my keyboard, Control-C or Command-C to copy it. I'm going to create a new browser window up here. And I'm going to right-click in, I'm just going to paste it, Command-V or Control-V, and I'm going to try and see what it says about my page. And what you'll notice here, if you look at the very top of my tab here, is it's just cycling. It's cycling because it can't find this address. And the reason for that is currently our firewall doesn't have the ports or the doorways that are used for web access open. So we're contacting this IP address, but it's basically not answering. There's no response because we haven't told it it's okay to take HTTP or HTTPS requests. So I'm just going to stop it from spinning here by clicking the X button on the side. And what we need to do is go into the OpenStack dashboard, and we're going to open up the ports. So to do that, there's a little network menu option down the left-hand side. We're going to click on that. Inside here is the security groups. I'm going to click on security groups. And we already have two security groups. Up here at the top, we see we have the ability to do a search and filter, and there's a little add option here that's been grayed out. And in parentheses at the end, we see quota exceeded. That's because I asked for the most basic of the resources that are available, and that only includes two security groups. You're welcome to request more up to a certain reasonable limit by contacting the cloud team. But I want to show you how you get around it if you needed it right now. So we created a security group last week called SSH. And what we're going to do is we're going to manage the rules inside the SSH security group. We're going to leave default alone. So I click Manage Rules. And inside, you can see we have some rules that are already here. Last week, you saw me add one SSH rule, but I've added two since then because I've been moving around and I wanted other IP addresses to have access. So in addition to these, we're also going to add a rule. So the top right, we're going to click the plus here. And under rule, instead of building a custom rule, we can just choose one of the pre-built templates. And we're certainly going to need HTTP access, right? And we can leave everything else exactly the way it is. This CIDR address here, the 00000, just says we'll accept traffic from anywhere. If you wanted to confine it, so perhaps only certain people within your university or a particular IP address range, then you can take action there and make some additions. But typically a web page, we want anybody to get it. So I'm going to choose Add at the bottom right. Going to come up here, and at the bottom you should see that the port range that's now open here for anybody is 80, and it says HTTP. And since we're here, we're going to be doing HTTPS as well. Let's add that rule too. So I'm going to click Add Rule. Instead of custom TCP rule, we're going to choose HTTPS. Again, we're going to leave everything else as is, and I'm going to choose Add. So because this security group is already attached to my volumes, to my instances, to my virtual machines, I should be able to swap over to that new tab I created. My IP address is already in there, and it was just spinning before. But if I run it now, it's doing something else here. My browser is trying to be helpful here and dump other stuff in here. And perhaps I didn't actually attach the... Come on. Shouldn't be doing that. All right. But what you should be seeing here, and I'm not sure why it's being this way, is you should see a web page that's going to come up and say, welcome to Nginx, right? But it's not going to be a web page that we want. So we're actually going to go in here, we're going to make some changes. And it's possible, although I'm pretty sure I cleaned this out, that there's still some things left inside this virtual machine from some of the testing that I did. But we'll discover that in a moment. But if you're following along, you shouldn't be having the issue I have. This is either a browser memory issue in the cache or perhaps a mistake that I have. You should be able to drop in your IP address and see something here that says welcome to Nginx. So let's move on. We're going to hop over back to the terminal. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create some directories that are going to hold data for us. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to type clear and press enter, and that's just going to move everything up. So if I scroll back up, you can see all the content still there. It's just going to make it easier for you to see right now. So what I'd like to do is make a new directory, and because of where I'm going to make that, I need to be the super user to do it. So I'm going to say super user do mkdir for make directory. And where do I want to make it? I want to make it in /var/www. And I'm going to create a new folder called WG demo for WestGrid demo. And because that folder doesn't exist currently, it tells me that what my browser is doing is caching that IP address from some of the demos that I was doing. So this is a clean virtual machine, and everything should move forward for us from here. So I'm going to press enter. It doesn't tell me it did or didn't. Silence is golden, so I can assume that it's actually there. And what I'd like to do now is move into that directory. So cd/var/www/wg demo. You can see my prompt is updated there to tell me where I am. If I look in here with just an ls for listing the contents of this directory, we don't see anything because it's empty. We just built it. So into this directory, this is the place where I would build my website. I build all my web content. We're not going to go through how to build that web content, a lot of HTML or JavaScript or anything like that today, but we will build one very simple HTML page. And so to do that, we're going to need some write permission here, so I'm going to be the super user. The text editor that we're going to use is Nano. You can be a fan of Vim or Emacs, whatever you want, but Nano's pretty clean and easy to use for people that aren't used to the command line interface, so we're going to use it today. And I'm going to make a file called index.html. So if you've never seen Nano before, it opens up and you can just type things. It's very much like a very, very basic text editor because it's very much like that because that's exactly what it is. And so what we're going to put in here is our HTML code. You could use something much more fancy to do this, but for our purposes today, this would just be fine. So I'm going to make a header 1 tag. And you'll notice that the color changes here. That's because when we opened Nano, we put a .html at the end of the file name we're suggesting. So Nano is helpfully going to try and color hypertext markup language code for us. Inside this tag, we're going to just put a standard hello world, right? And we'll put 5 exclamation points at the end so we know it was us that made this. And I'm going to close my h1 tag with a /h1. I'm going to hold Control and press X to exit, and you can see the list of commands that are at the bottom. The little hat or caret character there means control, so you can Control G for help, Control X for exit. Because I've changed the file, Nano is helpfully going to suggest, do you want to save this? We're going to press Y for yes. It's suggesting a file name because we gave it a file name when we opened. If we just said sudo nano, we'd have to type something in here, so I can just press enter. And now it's the case that it looks like nothing's happened. But if I do an ls to list the structure of this directory, boom, I can see we now have a file called index.html. So we have this website, and it's available. But what we're missing is some content. Right? Well, we have the content, but what we need to do is what we need to do is tell Nginx to use this website instead of that demo page. Now that I'm thinking about it, we're going to have some trouble with my browser remembering things. So I'm going to come up here to Chrome. I'm going to go to Preferences, and I'm going to clear out my cache, right? I'm going to tell it not to remember all the things that's causing me trouble right now. So I think it's in the advanced section. There should be a cache clear browser caching, clear history, cookies, cache, and more. So I'm going to just clear everything off here. You don't need account completion in the address bar. That's what's causing us trouble right now. So I'm just going to say clear data. I should be able to just drop in that IP address right now. And this is what you should see. So it was my browser caching trying to remember another URL that I attached to this. And you'll see how to do that this afternoon. That was, not this afternoon, but in a few moments, that was causing us trouble. So this is the screen that you should see. And so I wanted to show you that now because it's about to change. So rather than the basic Nginx page, what we'd like to serve, and I'm going to swap back to my terminal now, is we'd like to serve this page that we just created, this index.html page. That's going to say hello world. So we're going to tell Nginx where our website is and how to use it. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Nginx has two special directories that we're going to use. One is called sites available, and so this is a list of sites that it can draw on. And it also has a set of directory called sites enabled. And so these are the ones that are actually turned on. Just because something's available doesn't mean that it's actually turned on. Think of it as a library. There are books that are available at the library, but it doesn't mean that you have them. So we need to tell it, A, that this site does exist, and B, that it's the one that we want it to be serving. So we're going to do that right now. So to do that, we're going to move into that directory. And that directory is in what's sometimes referred to as etc or the etc directory. So etc Nginx, and you can see me typing really fast here. I'm pressing tab to complete, and that ensures that I'm typing things that actually exist on the system. So if I do it for sites, we'll see it'll type sites up to the hyphen, and then after that, it's waiting for me. I can press tab twice to see the options that are there, and it brings me back to the same place I was typing before. I can put in the A, press tab, it'll fill in the available. Press enter, and now we can see my prompt is updated. I'm now in the sites available directory. So what's in the sites available directory? Well, if I do an ls, I can see that we've got a site called default that is the default site that comes with Nginx when we installed it. So what we're going to want to do here is we're going to want to copy, because we don't want to have to type this whole thing by scratch, because we're working inside these directories that require root or super user access, we need sudo. So I'm going to say sudo cp default. So I'm going to copy the default. Cp is the copy command. And I'm going to copy it to a file called wgdemo. So what is default? Well, we're going to look at it in just a moment, but it is the set of server commands for how Nginx should behave. So if I run an ls now, I see I now have both a default and wgdemo. So we're going to modify wgdemo. Right? And we're going to look at it and see what's in there too. So we're going to use nano to do that. So sudo nano wgdemo. I press enter. You can see a whole lot of content in here. These hashtags at the beginning, or these hashes, make it clear that these are all comments. And what we have here, as we're just scrolling down, I'm just using two-finger scroll here on my trackpad. You can do the same thing with the mouse wheel or up and down arrow keys to move through and see what Nginx has added. And you can see that if you took out all these comments, there wouldn't be very much here at all. So what we need to do is we need to modify this line right here. It's telling Nginx where the root is, right? The root is not var /var/www/html, that's where that welcome to Nginx page is. What we need to do is we need to tell it that it's /var/www/ and I called it WG demo. And so that's going to be the root of our website. So we just make that one small change. I'm going to hold Control and press X to exit. I'm going to say, yes, I want to save the modified buffer. I want to save my changes. I want to keep the file name WG demo. I come back out, and it looks like nothing's changed. But the file has changed, and if I do ls, we can see that it's still there. So I mentioned before that there's sites available. This is like the books that are available in the library, and then there's also sites enabled. What is the site that we actually want to be deployed? So we need to move this file or have a copy of this file in the sites enabled directory. We're going to do something here that's a little bit fancy. We're not going to create a full copy of this. What we're going to create, well, we're not going to create a separate copy or an item that can stand on its own. What we're going to do is create a symbolic link. So we're going to put a link, a symbolic link, inside the site's enabled directory that will point to the file that's in the sites available directory, the file that we just changed. And the reason we're doing this is it's much easier to update. We can always come up to sites available, go into WG demo, make changes, and it will immediately show those changes in sites enabled because it's just a pointer over here to the file that's in sites available. So command to do that, we need to be super user. The command for links and creating links is ln. We're going to put a space and then a -s, and this says that we're going to create a symbolic link. Where are we going to create the link from? So from and to, so it's going to be /etc/ /nginx/sites available. And here again, I'm using tab completion, so I can type really quickly, WG demo. And where am I going to put it? We're going to /etc/ /nginx/sites enabled WG demo. And it doesn't say anything, right? It's not saying anything because silence is golden. It's created this link for us. Right? So this should work out nicely. So what we need to do here is we're going to do a system restart. So it's sudo system control, so systemctl. We want to restart Nginx. Now, here we see that there's an error, right? And so we want to see what this error, what the reason for this error is. Now, I know why this error is here. I want you to see it because it's going to happen for you at some point. So sudo systemctl status Nginx. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. What you should be able to see is that here on this second line here, it says we've got a duplicate default server, right? So what this means is that we've got too much that's competing inside that sites enabled directory. So to get out of here, I'm going to hold Control and C. And what we need to do is look inside /etc/ /nginx/sites enabled, right? And immediately there we see that there's a default and there's also WG demo. We need to get rid of that default. So I'm going to do that with sudo rm for remove /etc/ /nginx sites enabled, and I want to get rid of the default. Right. Silence is golden, it's going to make that change. I'm just going to press up twice with my arrow key so I can see that ls again. I can see that it's totally gone. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to restart Nginx. Sudo system control restart Nginx. Now this is golden. It looks like it's running. So we should be able to check this now. I'm going to swap back to my browser. So here I am at my IP address, 206.12.88.252. And if you're following along or not, you should be able to go to your web browser and type that IP address in and see this. I'm going to press refresh, and I get my hello world. So I can now serve static web pages. Boom. And if I wanted, I could build out within that WG demo directory a whole hierarchy of HTML pages. So that's part one. Deploying HTTP, right? And you've seen a little bit of error shooting here with Nginx, using the status with the system control to see what the problems are, and you have to read through these. If you're going to use Nginx or Apache, at some point you're going to make a mistake in the config files. You're going to have to get used to reading those. And so take the time to actually look through and figure out what the problem is. So we're going to move on to HTTPS. So why would you want this? Well, it was particularly if you're going to say, well, I don't really care. My site doesn't have to be that secure. Well, some things have happened recently that might make it very attractive for you. Google has recently, in the past year or so, made HTTPS a ranking factor for it. So if you want your website to rank higher, having HTTPS enabled will give you a boost. I don't know how much of a boost it's going to give you, but it's not hard to enable HTTPS, so it's probably worth your time if you want to be found more easily, because secure sites are to be preferred over those that are non-secure. The second reason is that Chrome and the Chrome family of browsers have started to show not secure warnings on sites that don't have HTTPS installed. And so this can make it look like your site's not secure, and if your users aren't that savvy, they can get worried about it and might mean that they're not going to use your site. So it's a good reason to turn it on. So we're going to do that right now. It's going to take us probably about 10 minutes to do, maybe a little bit longer because I'll be talking through it. So we're going to get certificates from a place called Let's Encrypt. The certificates are free, and there's software that we're going to deploy that will build the certificate and install it as part of Nginx right here, and it'll do that pretty quickly. We already have Nginx installed. HTTPS is part of this. We've already opened the port for it, and HTTPS is Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure. It deploys SSL and TSL. SSL is Secure Socket Layer. It's a deprecated protocol, but Transport Layer Security is TLS, and that's what HTTPS is really going to be deploying for us. The actual piece of software we're going to use to work with the Let's Encrypt authority is called Cert Bot. So the first thing that we're going to do is add the Cert Bot Repository. So we already have a set of libraries that Ubuntu has told us that we can go to get software packages from. We need to tell it we want to add a new one. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. I'm just going to type clear here just to move things up to the top of the screen. And it's sudo add-apt repository with dashes in the middle there. PPA stands for Personal Package Repository, right? And then we need to tell it which personal package repository, certbot, and out of the certbot repository we want certbot. There's other things that are in there. It'll go off and get that. It's gonna, do we really want to do this? Of course, I'm gonna press enter. And it's gonna go and get that repository and make it available to us. So once that's done, you can see it wasn't that big. Now we need to actually tell it to install the software. So sudo apt-get, right, install, just like for Nginx. But instead, this time, the piece of software that we want is Python Cert Bot Nginx, right? So it's a Python distribution of the program called Cert Bot, and we're going to install the Nginx version of it, which is going to allow the tool to write some Nginx code for us and makes it pretty slick and fast. So I press enter for that. It tells me all the things it's going to do. You can see here it's going to take up about 6 megs. So I'm going to say yes to that. And it's going to go off and install all the Python packages that are required to run CertBot and unpack them and make this work for us. So while this is going on, I need that IP address again. Right? So I'm going to swap back to my browser window. I'm going to come back in here to the OpenStack dashboard in the Arbutus Cloud. I'm going to open up my instance, so that's under the compute panel, and then the sub-panel is instances. It takes a moment here to load. I could go back here to my other browser and grab it from there, but in case you didn't have that open, it says floating IP address. This is going to be really important for us. So I'm going to highlight it and copy it. You can use the edit menu or Command-C or Control-C. I'm just going to swap back to my terminal now. And the reason that I'm doing this is we need to use these certificates. We need an actual domain name. You cannot use just the IP address. So my IP address is this 206 one right now, but I need something that's like research.ca or really great things that are being worked on.com or something like that. You can get them. They do exist with your Compute Canada, right? And so we're going to show you a hack to get you one of these domains, but they're really not pretty. It's in your best interest if you want your research website or your tool that you're building. You're going to want to get your own domain, and you're going to have to go someplace to one of the providers to pick that up and then attach it to that IP address. So the way to get the hack to provide the certificate is to type host. And this doesn't have to be on the system you're on. It can be on any command line. But you want the host for this IP address, right? So that's the IP address for my VM. Tell me who the host is. So I run that command, and you can see I get a domain name pointer here at the end. So it looks like the IP address, but it's swapped all the dots, all the periods for hyphens, and it now is .cloud.computecanada.ca. So this is going to be my domain name. So I'm going to copy that, and you can see why it's not a pretty domain name. You don't want to tell people that's where your website is, but if you're just building it, you're doing development, it's going to work out really nice for you. So we need this because we need to pass it to CertBot. So because CertBot is going to make a number of changes to the system that we're going to need authority to do, we're going to be super users to do it. So we have super user do CertBot. We want to pass it the Nginx parameter. -D flag, which I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what that means right now, but it's easily lookupable. You can do you look at the manual page for CertBot with man CertBot. And I'm just going to paste in at the end here that domain name. Oh, the -D says this is a domain name. That's what it is. Sorry. So we're running CertBot with the Nginx flag, and with the -D flag, it says the thing that comes after is my domain name. So I'm going to press enter to run CertBot. It's going to ask me for an email address. So where's it going to send its renewal notices, if there's security incidents or things like that that it's aware of. So I'm going to pass it my email. It's not right. John.Simpson at computecanada.ca. You'll have to give it an email as well. It's going to ask if you agree to its terms of service. If you want to make use of them, you're going to have to say yes. So I'm going to put in agree. It's going to ask, are you willing to share your email address with the Electronic Frontier Foundation? This is a group that really one of the founders of Let's Encrypt. Can they share information with you? That's entirely up to you. I believe you can say no here, but I'm quite happy to have information from them. They do some good work. So I'm going to say yes. And it's going to go get that certificate. These challenges are little verifications that are being run. And when it's all done, it's going to ask me, do I want to do redirects or not, right? So option 1 is no redirect, so it's just going to leave it as is. But what I'd really like all requests to the HTTP version to be redirected to HTTPS, right? We don't want people using the HTTP version if we have a secure version available. So I'm going to choose option 2 here, press enter, and it's going to redirect all traffic, right, from the HTTP version to the HTTPS version. So we should now be able to go to our web browser. This is where we were before. I'm just going to remove that IP address, and I'm going to paste in, because it's still in the memory, that domain name that was given to me when I ran that host command. So 206-12-88, etc. Right? And I'm going to run that. And notice I didn't tell it it should be secure. Right? I'm just going to run this, and it's going to try and do it HTTP. We immediately see the HTTPS upgrade happens, right? And it's chugging along, and it loads the web page for us, right? So we have success, right? Everything is working really nice. So we could stop here, but I'm going to show you one small hiccup that might annoy you and how to get around it. And so that small hiccup is this. If I go back to the previous page with 206.12.88, it'd be really nice if this redirected automatically to the secure page in that domain name. But if I try to run this right now, right, it doesn't do anything. And you can see here, well, it does load the web page, but you can see here it says it's not secure. So what I have is I have 2 ways of accessing my web page now. I have one with that domain name, and it could be a fancy one that you've purchased and attached to this IP, or it could be the hack that I've showed you how to do. And we also have the IP address, and the IP address is not forcing the move to the other domain, and it's not forcing the move to the security upgrade. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's going to be the last thing that we do today. So I'm going to swap back into my command line. I'm going to clear just to move up this junk. But before we do, it's not really junk. It's important for you to read these notes. Again, we offer infrastructure as a service. You're responsible for making sure that everything on your VM is working well. You can set these up to auto-renew. We're not going to have time to do it today. If it is something you're interested in, it could be Webinar 4 or Webinar 5 for us. So let us know, and we can walk through the process of having to do that for you. But for now, I'm just going to clear it away. And what we're going to need to do, we're still in the sites available directory. I can see that here in my prompt. I need to modify that WG demo file, the one with all the commands for the Nginx server, for the Nginx server. So sudo nano Nginx. Oh, sorry, we do not want to create a file called Nginx. We want a sudo nano, so I just controlled X to get out of there. It's actually a file called WG demo that we've already created in here. You saw that at the beginning of this. What we need to do is we have all sorts of commands. Well, we have things that are happening here. So it's listening on port 80. It's the default server, blah, blah, blah. We told it where to get the index.html page from there. And we can see there's new content at the bottom. And this is all the content that Nginx has added for us, right? We're not going to play with that content at all. What we're going to do is we're going to add another server block. What Nginx does is it just reads through these and applies the rules that it finds. As long as the rules don't conflict, everything's going to work out really well. So we're going to create a new rule at the bottom. So we're going to say server and open it with curly braces and close it with a closing curly brace. The standard convention here is 4 spaces in, so I'll put that in. We want to listen on port 80, so listen space 80. Semicolon to end the line. We need to tell it what server name to watch for on port 80, right? So if it sees this come up, and this is going to be my IP address, 206.12.88.252. And I have it written down on another screen here. I'm not just remembering that. Normally I copy and paste it. And what do we want to do whenever it sees that? We want to return an HTTP code, right? And the code we want to return is 301, right? 301 is the permanently modified or the permanently redirected command. So here I am using paste. I just typed in the domain. So what we're saying is we're going to listen at port 80. It's HTTP. Anytime I see this IP address come through, I am going to tell the browser that it's been permanently shifted, that's the 301 code, to this new domain name. So if you had a domain name that wasn't kind of the hack like this, you put that there instead of 206-12-88, etc. And that's all we need here for that. So I'm going to hold Control and press X to exit. I'm going to say yes to modify the buffer. I want to write to WGDemo. I'm going to press Enter. Now we've made this change, but Nginx has already started and it's loaded this file. So we need to restart Nginx. So sudo system control systemctl restart Nginx. No complaints, silence is golden, it should work just fine. So I'm going to swap back into my browser window. So I'm not secure, right? So I don't have HTTPS in the front of this, so it's going to be going to port 80. There's my IP address. I'm going to press reload. Not sure why my page is not working. I've made a mistake in here somewhere. So we'll have to go back and have a look at that. So it's not quite right. So let's go back to the terminal. I'm going to press up to recall the sudo nano wgdemo command. It's going to open up the wgdemo file, and I'm going to scroll down here, and I have made a mistake somewhere. My mistake is that in this return line, I did not tell it that this is HTTPS, right? With the colon and the double slashes. By not doing that, what it did was take 206 and then treat this as some sort of, and treat my 206-12 as a subdirectory. So that's a mistake on my part. So I'm going to do that by putting the HTTPS in front. I'm going to Control X to get out. I'm going to say yes to save, keep my file name, pressing up twice to get the restart command back without typing it. Press Enter. I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to get rid of the end of that. So it's now just the raw IP address. Press Enter. This is Chrome being helpful again and trying to remember these browser preferences. So I'm going to have to clear my cache again. I apologize for that. So I'll have to open the preferences, go down to Advanced. Clear browser data is at the end of this block. I need to clear my browsing history and my cached files. I'm going to say clear data. I'll leave that panel open in case I need it again. So now it's forgotten all the things it's trying to do to be helpful. Got 206.12.88.252. Press Enter, and we see that we get the little lock. It's secure, and it has redirected that all the way up to this new domain name that we have told Let's Encrypt to use on Cert Bot and Nginx. Now it looks like we're done, but there is a bit of a one small hiccup left, and that is that if somebody was to come in here and say HTTPS / and then 206, right? But if we try to run this, right, we're going to get a whole bunch of errors here. And the reason for that is the IP address, when it's passed to port 80, we've told Nginx how to handle that. But when we try to pass this to the secure port, which is 443, we haven't told Nginx how to handle this. So from Chrome's perspective, it looks like we're trying to fake a secure website. Right? And so we get this not secure warning in the browser bar, and we get all this content in the middle of the screen. So if somebody was ever to do that, they get really worried. So how do we fix that? This will be the last thing that we do today. Swap back to the command line here. We're going to go back into the WG demo set of server commands for Nginx. I just pressed up twice to save myself typing that. Press enter. So scroll down to the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the file, and I'm going to put in a new server block. So it's going to look very much like the one that's already there. So open and closing parentheses for it. I'm going to listen, but instead of listening on port 80, I'm going to listen on port 443. Server underscore name, same as before. It's going to be looking for 206.12.88.252, semicolon at the end of the line. But what are we going to do here? We're going to return the 301 code, right? Again, this is the permanently redirected HTTPS : // and you saw what happened. We forgot that last time. And I still have that in my clipboard, so I can just paste it in. Right? It's easy to forget to put in the semicolon at the end, but that'll probably cause us trouble, so I'll make sure I stick in that semicolon, and everything should be good. So we now have two blocks, one listening on port 80 that redirects the IP address, one listening on port 443, which is a secure port, that's also taking the IP address and redirecting it. So I'm going to exit this, Control X. I'm going to say yes to save. I'm going to keep that file name, just press enter. I'm going to press up twice to get back to my system control, restart Nginx. I'm going to run it. I don't have any errors. I'm going to swap back to my browser window. And here I have all this not secure stuff. It should be able to just come back up here in the address bar and either click the refresh button or just press enter. I think Chrome is going to be not helpful for us here again, so I'm going to clear my browser data again. So I've got HTTPS out in front of my IP address. And I must have made another mistake in that file. I apologize for that. So let's go back to it and check real quickly. We're basically done, except for whatever hiccup I put in there that prevented it from running. I am not sure why it's misbehaving. Oh, there it goes. No, now it's back. Something's not right with this, and I'm not sure what it is, because it should be fine. And so I'll do a little bit of troubleshooting during question period and try to figure it out. But other than that, everything should work well for you. If there is something I can't figure out during question period, then we'll tag it on at the end of the video afterwards to make sure that it's going to work for you. So thanks for watching through this. What have you seen today? You've seen roughly how to deploy some static web pages without actually building the site itself using Nginx on the Compute Canada cloud for HTTP. You also saw how to deploy it for HTTPS. And then this last little flourish, right? So how to actually get the IP address to redirect to the domain name. Having a small hiccup here with the secure version of it, but you've seen how to do it in principle. So hopefully this has been helpful for you.